Welcome to Hope on Fire, relevant talk radio for young adults. Whether you're 25 or 45, there's bound to be a discussion that you care about. Our mission is to share practical ways to find God in your everyday life. Our host today is Sabine Vatel.
I had just moved in to a new area after graduating from college and had started a work that I really loved. I didn't know many people there. One weekend I stayed home to unpack the remaining boxes. After a while, I realized how quiet it had been, so I checked my phone messages. It blinked 0. So I went back an hour later and checked the answering machine to make sure it worked properly. It was fine. I looked at my email inbox for the 5th time that day, and it was still blank. I decided to go through my numbers and maybe to talk to somebody and just say hello. And no one seemed to be home. There was nothing interesting on TV, just old reruns and sports. I walked around in my new home before plopping myself on the floor. It was official. I was lonely. Loneliness is an emotional experience that none of us can completely escape. It comes through transition times and in various degrees. For some, it is a daily and painful reality, but there is hope. I'm Sabine Vatel, your host for this week's Hope on Fire, as we talk about how to overcome loneliness. To help with our discussion, my co-hosts and contributing editors are here today, and I have, first of all, I'll introduce my special guest, Shawn Zimmerman. And Shawn, you have seen him before and heard him before. He was in a previous program with us. And Shawn, for those who don't know him, is a counselor, an experienced psychologist, and you find joy helping people with their relationships. And he currently serves as at the Physician Support Services at Florida Hospital. And I know that your research and your experience is going to be really valuable on this topic of loneliness. So I'm really glad that you're here with us today.
Glad to be here, Sabine.
Yeah, and good to see you here. And Randy Magray. And Randy is just a versatile kind of guy. He's a contributing editor for Money, Career, and Stewardship, and he's also a business owner with his wife, Heather. And I've heard some powerful experiences coming from you that just testify of God's love, and you know, you're just willing to be real about things. So maybe that's why you're here. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
And of course, so we saved the best for last.
Sure.
My co-host Rick Mann is here today, and Rick, I'm glad you're here to talk about this topic.
Me too. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, this is great to have you guys here. Now, the loneliness is really prevalent in our age group, and younger in particular. But, you know, guess what? I saw this article which fascinated me. In 2000, Stanford research came out with these results that the use of the internet was really associated with this prevalence of loneliness in our society. And it actually made some internet users angry, and it made the news. What it basically said is that people, on average, spend more time in the internet than relating to people. Does that sound familiar to you guys? Does that sound plausible?
Well, yeah, because I mean, you think about the internet use. It's one of those things where it's so easy then to meet somebody new, and I guess that could be taken the wrong way. But one of the things that helps people build friendships and relationships is to find common ground. And if you have a hobby or something that you're interested in, it's so easy to find a group of like-minded people there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting to say that it's is it okay or is it a bad thing that you substitute friends that are right here versus that are out there and more nebulous? I mean, is that a bad thing? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's...
You would think technology, I mean, we talk about being connected, and you would think that technology would be a helpful thing, but it seems like it is a substitute. I was telling you guys earlier, when I have people over, and if we have a get-together, I'll try not to turn on the TV because I'll just be mesmerized by it and forget everything around me,
Right.
you know? So I can't handle that.
You know, I think as we look at the BlackBerries and all the different technology we have to connect these days, I think it's just a reflection of how we are so desirous of connecting with other people. But I think the question really becomes, are we getting it? Are other people getting us? Do we feel we've been gotten by other people? And as we talk about loneliness, I think that's a key piece. Do we feel like we've been got by somebody else?
Yeah, because I mean, I guess that's a really good point. Because just because I'm connected because you sent me an email doesn't necessarily mean that that's a meaningful connectedness.
Absolutely.
I guess you can say it that way.
Email doesn't hold the emotionality or the connections that are nonverbal, that are 90% of the conversation. So do I feel gotten or not?
Yeah, what about those emoticons, though? Isn't that the point? Those little
That's it,
pictures,
yeah,
smiling
absolutely.
faces.
That's right.
Anyway, try to take the place of our face-to-face.
A real face, right.
Yeah, a real face, exactly. Now, they say also that it's an endangerment to our health as well, too. I mean, the research, I tried to do some research here before this topic, and 5% or more illnesses are connected to people just not finding somebody they can confide in. And they're lonely, and that affects their body as well, too.
Well, every place you have the things we just talked about, the BlackBerry or your computer where you're doing instant messaging or through your phone or you're doing blogging or whatever, it's still the computer in whatever room you have it in your house, and you're there by yourself. And so the connections may be there, and they may be some more personal or less personal, but it's still just you in that space. It's not that contact.
Yeah, the human contact anyway. Yeah. You know, we're talking about loneliness, and maybe it's a strange topic for some to be tackling it, but the Washington Post, which is a pretty respected newspaper or mode of communication to the world, reported that more and more people are looking for solutions to their loneliness. And not only is it prevalent, but it caused concern to researchers so much that they increased research to find out why people were more lonely. And part of the reason also that it has been difficult to research is people are less likely to admit that. And what do you think about the shame associated with the issue of loneliness? Or maybe you guys are not ashamed.
Well, I mean, you'd have to ask yourself, you know, what causes people maybe to get into that position to begin with. I mean, you know, I've when we were talking about the show before we started, I was trying to think back in my life when I've been lonely. You know, and what has that done to me personally, and what have I had to do to get out of that? And typically in my life, I was voted most friendly when I was in high school, which was really kind of weird to me because I don't consider myself all that friendly, and I just don't make friends really easily. I might get to know you as acquaintances, and I think there's a lot of people out there that are probably like me, where you know a lot of people, but you don't really know a lot of people. And it's been situational with me. Maybe after a breakup in a relationship, or like you said in your
moving
intro,
to a new
when I moved
place.
to Colorado, I knew nobody.
Right.
And those were types of the situations where I think a lot of us find ourselves in, especially as young adults. You know, we're moving from college to transitioning to life, and we're looking for Mr. or Mrs. Right or whatever. But what are some of the things that actually cause the loneliness in people's lives? I mean, what's the problem?
Well, I think of the difference between aloneness and being lonely. As in, everyone has times where they're alone, but they don't necessarily feel lonely. I think in my mind, loneliness is kind of the meaning that we make out of being alone. I may say to myself, I'm alone. It must be because nobody likes me. Therefore, I'm alone, right? And suddenly that meaning makes me feel very lonely. Or, everybody else they're evil. They're bad people out there. That's why nobody's hanging out with me. Therefore, I'm lonely. So I think it's the meaning we make out of being alone that causes us to feel lonely.
Yeah. And there's, thank you for that. That's actually, I never heard it quite that way. I know it's a feeling anyway, because one can be alone and then not feel lonely. I think I've told people when they find I'm single, not everybody, but they look at me like I have a terminal illness or something.
Like, I'm sorry, really?
You have a mania? What? But the reality is, I don't feel. One of the times I felt lonely hasn't been because of my single status, really, or my status as a single. It has been for other reasons. And I've met a lot of my friends, however, who are in relationships, or married, and who do express feeling lonely, Shawn. And you work a lot with couples as well as individuals, so surely you've seen that in your practice.
The loneliest place is being in a relationship where there's the expectation, the hope, the dream, the reality that can be of connectedness and togetherness, but feeling lonely at the same time, not feeling connected, not feeling like your spouse or significant other gets you. That's the loneliest that we can actually feel, is being in that relationship, but then not feeling connected.
Well, the same thing could be happening, say you're a college student and you live in the dorm and you're surrounded by people, but you still feel alone. I mean, but I guess it comes down to, like you said before, sometimes it's a perspective thing. I don't know if you didn't use the word perspective, but it's the how you relate to it or how you identify it. And so I guess there's two components to it. There's actually being around lots of people and feeling and really being alone because you can't reach out and be connected. And then there's also the point where, well, maybe I am alone, but that's okay. It's I am alone, but I'm not lonely. So I don't know. I mean, maybe we can't talk about it right now, but what's the definition of loneliness? I mean, we're talking about.
It's a good question.
Yeah. If you had to define that, how would you define that?
I guess I would define it on meaning, how I experience it, what it means to me. My being alone, what does it mean? I may be single, and I may be very happy with what I'm doing, and it may be a very meaningful life that I'm experiencing, and I don't feel an overwhelming sense of being alone or loneliness. So I think it is the meaning that we make, as with most of our life. It's what we decide is going on, what we start to believe about ourselves and our relationship with others that causes us to have certain feelings.
If that's the case, then this is very reversible. You're saying that it's a matter of almost changing our mind and changing the meaning of the situation we find ourselves in. Is it that simple to just... when I moved,
just flip a switch?
Yeah, I said, like when I was lonely, when I was alone, when I moved to my new job and I was alone, I could have said, plop on the floor and say, I'm really not lonely.
That's the trick with feelings, though. They aren't something that we can just switch. They are information. I mean, I believe God gave us feelings to give us information about what's going on with us, what's happening inside of us. And by taking that information in and respecting it and valuing what our feelings are, then we can begin to tie into what are the meanings we're making in this situation or that situation. And then as we understand our meanings, then we begin to bridge to making relationships, doing things that meet those needs that we have, understanding ourselves. And with loneliness, I think a big part that plays out is we get locked into ourselves in that space. We stop seeing other people. Like the old LCD pictures, when they didn't have screensavers, and you'd see the picture of whatever was on there for loneliness. We start seeing only ourselves and our own loneliness and our own pain. And as long as we're seeing our pain, we can't see other people. And as we don't see other people, we don't connect with other people.
So you're saying we get stuck in some kind of a cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
But where are we gleaning those feelings and those meanings from? I mean, if we're not feeling connected with God, I mean, are we feeling loneliness because if we can't interact with God, how can we possibly, even in a marriage situation, how can you interact with your mate and feel that same sense of fulfillment that you were talking about earlier? I think at the basic level, it starts with God and to put yourself in tune with Him to find out where are these feelings coming from and how can I change them.
Well, I think it's interesting because one person's definition of what alone is and loneliness might be completely different, completely based on maybe someone's personality or their needs, because we're all different. And so one person in a given situation won't feel lonely, but another person will feel lonely. And I think it gets back to what you just said is that you have to identify maybe yourself and kind of be a little bit of introspective and
examine yourself.
Examine yourself, right?
Yeah, and it might just be that loneliness. It might be an opportunity for introspection. And I know on the other half of our program, we'll talk some more about the idea of that loneliness may actually be a gift. This unpleasant thing can actually be a gift, and also to kind of how do we assess ourselves and in understanding ourselves, take steps towards healing and kind of fixing it. So more on some practical tips for our listeners on what we can do about loneliness when we come back. Welcome back, listeners, to Hope on Fire. I'm your host today, Sabine Vatel, and I have with me some tremendous panel. Of course, Rick Mann is my co-host, and our guest, Randy Magray, and Dr. Shawn Zimmerman. And we're talking about how to overcome loneliness, and it's a common experience to many people, and we're saying that it's common, it's normal, but there's ways to overcome it as well, too. And as we were going into leaving the first part of the program, we talked about how loneliness, in terms of a gift, and I have here something actually adapted from this article called The Single Journey by Peter Nadeau, and he calls it a gift, which I think most people wouldn't think of that as a gift at all. One of the things he said is an opportunity when you're lonely for submission and surrender. And Randy, it goes back to what you were saying in terms of the primary relationship really is with God, getting right with God. I think you were saying, right?
Well, even from I mean, I guess we've all been lonely at some point or another, whether it's a major thing like maybe divorce or a long-standing relationship that ends. And having been there personally, I think you go through that, and it's what your relationship is with God. During that time, what's your attitude? Are you being positive and saying, God, I'm relying on you to either repair my broken heart or cure my loneliness somehow, bring me a friend, bring me a mate? Or are you being on the downside of it and saying, wow, why are you doing this to me? I mean, I'm not, what did I do to deserve this? I did my best, and, all the rest of it. So I think part of that has to be how much are you letting God be in charge of what you're going to, of what your feelings are going to be?
Yeah. And I think the alternative, yes, is self-pity. But I think we're being challenged to, God may be getting our attention and pushing us to take care of that primary relationship, putting him first in a sense. The other one that caught my attention was a motivation to change. I heard about the gift of pain. And that's the problem with leprosy, right? Is that there's no feeling. And people, will walk around and, I don't know, hit their finger and their finger drops. They don't realize it or something. I don't want to be gruesome here. But maybe loneliness is the same thing. It's maybe a good sign, right, Shawn? Isn't it a sign that we are actually healthy?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, all of our feelings are there for a reason. Pain is there for a reason. And what we do with it really is the impactive factor, what meaning we make from it, whether we use it as an opportunity to understand ourselves better and then begin to reevaluate what's going on in our environment, in our relationships. When you were talking about relationship with God a minute ago, I think a lot of people feel lonely when they think about God. When they think about the relationship with God, it's not necessarily a warm, fuzzy feeling, but where is God and how do I experience him? And I believe that those foundations of how we experience relationships, period, they relate to how we experience God as well. So we can, as we look at the feelings we have with God, we can also relate that to what were my experiences with my parents, with other relationships that kind of set up the kind of relationships now that I attribute to God. And that can be a powerful understanding of.
And things in our culture are based more, I think, on tangible things I can see, whether it's the bombardment of advertising that I need an iPod, I needed this, or I need that. It's things that you can, very
hold
quickly.
on to.
Yeah, and I can very quickly, I get in my car, I can be at Best Buy in 15 minutes, and I can have that gratification and something that I can hold in my hand, and I don't really have to work at it, but a relationship with God obviously takes more than that.
Right. A faith, I would imagine. And it's funny, when we read the Bible and you read the Psalms, the writers are not shy about expressing their feelings of being lonely and abandoned by God. Psalms 13, he asks, how long, God, will you forget me forever? And you feel this great divide between you and God. And you share a little bit of your personal experiences of what you had faced. I guess you did. In terms of how did you overcome that? Randy, any one of you, I guess, could answer that question.
Personally, I don't know that I can even look back on it and necessarily tell you. I mean, it was after divorce. It was a long, drawn out, as they often are, and it's you come. God actually brought me someone to help me through that, who I've been married to now for 7 years, and amen. So that God brings you eventually will bring you what you need if you trust in Him to do that, and yes. I wouldn't even say that at the time I was probably very helpful to Him in that process. It was just something that He brought to me, which I don't feel like I had a whole lot to do with it by keeping the positive attitude, and those are the things that I was talking about before. So.
Okay, so kicking and screaming, He led you through somehow.
Through something, exactly.
But you bring up a wonderful point. Somebody to help you through. Loneliness. As we think about when there's major traumas, when there are hurricanes, and when there's tsunamis, they bring in people to debrief other people, and then to debrief the people that are working with those people. What is that? That's to talk about things. That's to express some things. Get those things off your heart. And one of the things with loneliness is we start to implode, and we begin to not share. We do not debrief with other people what's going on inside of us, and it festers, it grows, and again it clouds our vision of other people, and not allowing us to then connect.
But I would imagine though. I mean, loneliness is probably tied to depression in a lot of ways, and sometimes when you're depressed, you don't realize it, or you know that you're depressed, but you don't know what. You don't know what to do about it. And for someone just to say, well, just reach out to somebody, they could say, well, it's not that easy. I mean, is it that easy, or are there other things that maybe are barriers that impede someone from trying not to be lonely anymore? Or, is it what are some of the other things that someone can do, or is that's the first step, is to reach out?
It's tough, to make kind of a blanket understanding of how do we help a person? How do we give a subscription or a prescription that works for people regarding loneliness or with depression? Because it's so individual. We are so unique. But, I think it all boils down to, at some point, being able to empathize. Empathy is really that ability to bridge my space and yours. If I'm really getting in touch with what you're experiencing, with that depression or what have you, I'm joining with your reality. I'm unifying with you. And in that moment, I'm connecting. And there's no way I can feel lonely when I'm connecting with you. It's the difficulty of moving out of the space of my pain to kind of connect with yours. And so that's where therapy and counseling comes in. For if it's gone on long enough or it's strong enough, we need somebody else that can enter into our space that way and care for us and empathize with us, so we then can open our blinds and really experience other people as well.
There's some.
Go ahead.
There's some listening to us who have, thank you, Shawn, who say, well, I'm fine. I mean, I'm alone, and I don't need anybody, and I'm just. And wouldn't that be sort of does it come to a point where you detached really, and that you don't really feel your need of other people, and I guess that's not really very healthy, but.
We got to cope with the pain somehow, and so absolutely, one of the ways is to detach, to not feel the pain.
Right, even the pain of our loneliness, and we kind of get used to it, don't we? I was really intrigued by an example of a study you had shared on the effect of isolation on somebody's psyche.
That's a great story. Absolutely.
Yeah, you should share that. It'd be great.
The idea is that we're not really individualistic like our culture really says. We are really part people, and we're part relationship. And if we're not in relationship with other people and connecting with other people, we're missing a big part of who we are.
Right.
The rugged individualists would say that we can do it all ourselves. Back just after World War II, they did 30 years of exploration experiments with volunteers regarding being alone. And they would submerge them in these tepid tanks. They would insulate it. There was no noise. It was totally quiet. They would cover their heads to give them oxygen. And what would happen? You'd think that if you were a rugged individualist, that you'd become more known to yourself. You'd understand yourself better. But what happened is they lost their ability to concentrate, and they began to hallucinate. They began to lose themselves in the process.
Lose their mind.
We're only part people. We have to be connected in order to be the rest of who we are.
Wow.
Oh, say that again. That was good.
We are only part people. We have to be connected to other people.
Right? In order to find ourselves.
To be ourselves, to be fully ourselves.
And that's how we were created. Even God is connected into three people, into three persons. That's a great mystery.
Isn't it?
But we're made in the image of a God who's very much connected within himself. So it's not surprising that we would also need that type of connection within and without. Wouldn't that make sense?
What a beautiful analogy.
Well, I thank you, Shawn.
You're welcome.
I might just write that down somewhere. I'll allow you to quote me there. You had alluded to it a little bit, Rick, when you mentioned the difference between aloneness and being lonely, and the aloneness by choice as well too. That somehow, ironically, that being by yourself can actually help you connect with other people.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess I was just thinking that there's another side to this coin, is that there's probably a lot of people listening to this show, and I would say maybe the vast majority or a large part I'm not alone, but they know someone who is lonely.
Right.
And I think it's really easy for people to say, well, they're probably choosing to be that way. Maybe that's just the type of person they are.
Yeah.
And so you have counseled, if you feel alone, you need to reach out. Well, I think there's an opposite part of that says, if you're not alone, maybe you need to reach out to those who are lonely, right? I mean, isn't there like a responsibility that we have to do that? I don't know. I guess I'm asking that question.
I think it's a great comment. It's a great comment because it reminds me of, and I think we'll list it on our list of resources on our website, hopeonfire.org. This Larry Crabb wrote a book called Connecting, and I think it's in its reprint, and it was really popular. And it said that it would actually put counselors out of business, Shawn, if Christians would rise up and take their duties seriously as healers of the soul.
Wow.
And actually reaching to other people and learning themselves to connect to other people. Christianity so much is preached, but I don't think very few of us learn how to do it. Put it to practice.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a huge task simply for the fact that I know that sometimes family is the last person you want to talk to because they've been involved in that relationship. I mean, especially if you were married, obviously
Right.
there's connections and maybe mom liked him, didn't, or you know what I mean. There's all
Right.
those dynamics that you have to deal with, and you're like the last person I want to talk to. is family, because they know all the things, and it's, they've kind of got predetermined. Well, you made the mistake on that one, and someone who can just come from a fresh perspective and not really have the background sometimes is the best help of anybody.
Yeah. And speaking of, within the concept of Christianity, there's also this discipline. We have a show on spiritual discipline that Rick Mann hosts, actually, on Simplicity, but we'll have other shows on a spiritual discipline. And solitude is one of them. And I know Rick is passionate about spiritual discipline. And solitude, basically isolating oneself with God. In fact, I have a quote here that says, "In solitude, you realize that you're part of the human family. And solitude always calls us to community." So it might be an opportunity for some to kind of reflect on that and figure out what God is calling us to do. In a few minutes that we have left, we do want to leave some maybe practical tips on how people can begin to get connected. Joining groups. One website called stoploneliness.com. Isn't that cool that they have a website on loneliness? Anyway, one of the tips that I gathered from that, and it's even an inventory that people can actually look into and kind of test themselves. But to be intentional and have a plan, actually, if that's what it takes, to practice connecting with other people. Once a week, call a friend or a family member and make that your task. And you mentioned the counseling.
And volunteering.
As well, too. And volunteering. Oh, thinking of other people as well, too. That's very important. Thank you guys for your input and for you listening to us. No matter how difficult your circumstances, remind yourself that God is near and He cares for you.
Hope on Fire is produced by Livestreams Media, a listener-supported ministry. To download a free copy of today's program or be a part of our social network, please visit our website at hopeonfire.org. You may also contact us by writing to Livestreams Media, P.O. Box 608513, Orlando, Florida 32860. Once again, that's Livestreams Media, P.O. Box 608513, Orlando, Florida 32860, or online at hopeonfire.org. Thank you so much for your letters and continued support. Until next time, may God set your hope on fire.